Hello and welcome to this studio at home roundtable debate on the future of partnerships. And our supporters for this debate are Equinix, and thank you to that. It's a really important time to be discussing partnerships, particularly between CIOs and their vendors, because we're living through a period of fantastic change. And I'm joined for this debate by three technology leaders who are going to share with us how they're seeing the partnership between service provider and user change. So please welcome my guests for this debate, Paul Kobe, Johan Arts, and Hernando Salada. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me for this discussion. Has the pandemic changed, both positively or negatively, the relationship between a partner, a supplier, or the user? Johan, I'll start with you. You're with Equinix. How have you seen the relationship change during the last tumultuous year that we've all lived through?
Well, clearly very tumultuous year. So interesting to comment on that. I felt it was very important to first baseline myself on, so what did really change, right? And is it really shifting the way we think about these relationships? I like to fall back on publicly available publications. Found a really nice article from McKinsey on the COVID situation where they try to detail out what has actually occurred. And interesting enough, they're quoting between 7 to 10 years of acceleration in digital transformation between what they're seeing in the landscape. And that kind of acceleration in digital transformation is obviously having an impact on the relationship between the vendors and the service providers, the way we look at it. And if you put the situation, the whole pandemic scheme in a timeline, we tend to divide these into three, call it time periods, where as the period between March and June, in our opinion, was kind of the drastic reaction period, which was followed by a period between the summertime and December, where things were a little bit more at ease, where people could catch a breath and started to pivot into some new initiatives. And then in a third phase, I would say starting the new year, when people had chance to tap into potentially new budgets that they set in the latter half of the first year, were able to drive really sustainable acceleration. And I think for vendors, it was very different on how they experienced the pandemic when you looked at how did you were part of any of these three time phases. If you were providing office for home equipment, that first phase was of course very important. If you were providing bandwidth on taps, that first phase was also really important. And I think that's really a critical element of how the relationship between the vendors and the service providers was affected in the degree to which you were part of any of those three time phases. I'll pause there for a second. I have some more to talk about, but I don't want to go too long on the first bit. So back to you, Mark.
Yeah, thank you very much. Paul, how did Johnson & Matthey find your suppliers? Did you find that they were ready and willing to partner with you? And what was an unprecedented event for you and the organisation?
Well, it was mixed, but first, typical of McKinsey is to oversell it. I'd say 3 to 5 years acceleration. Come off it, guys. 9 years. Good luck if you can see that. Anyway, I think the first thing to say, Mark, is there's a world of difference between a supplier and a partner, and there are a lot more suppliers than they are partners. So what we did was we made some. Seems light years back now, but it's only a year, isn't it? But last March we cut about a third out of the IT budget in order to conserve cash, because a lot of our plants were closing down. They restarted pretty quickly, actually, but we needed to conserve cash. So we then went and talked to the senior people in all of our suppliers. Pretty much every IT supplier talks to you about how they want to be partners. They all offer you, or used to offer you, they probably won't offer me now, a sort of a day in a high-tech room, with 2 large televisions, where they will tell you all about usually the same things, AI, ML, Industry 4.0, in a rather generic way. And then they will ask you to tell you all your strategy. So I tend not to sort of do those things. So we said, look, you say to your partners, so we'd like you to reduce what you're charging us by, 10 to 20%, but maintain the volume and the quality, exactly the same now. And if you're partners, you will consider that. And it's interesting. Most of them actually did contribute, and very effectively. And we also asked our contractors to do that as well. And it's hard to think about that. It was only 12 months ago, but we were very clear that that would tell us who was a genuine partner and who we actually wanted to work with in the future, now as we come out of this, and to talk about our future strategy and to share where we're going. So I think it was a very useful way of finding out who were your true partners.
Hernando, tell us about the industry you're in, and how did you find your suppliers, and was it a similar experience to Paul's?
Yeah, a lot of similarities. I think COVID, what it's really done is it's accelerated digital transformation and digital optimization as well. And what we're seeing is that the dependency on technology in this new world that we're in has increased exponentially, right? And technology organizations, you can't do it alone. It's probably not possible. So you have vendors and suppliers that need to really become partners. And that's a very different dynamic versus just trying to sell you a bunch of stuff that you may not even need. And it's a very, very competitive space. So I think partners are, and with us particularly, we went through this in healthcare, the ones that really understand your business, the ones that can help you drive business outcomes, those are going to be the winners, to Paul's point, and the ones who listen as well.
Yeah. And building on that, the technology industry, it requires a huge amount of investment. So therefore, there has to be a sort of a pretty dynamic sales cycle to prop these businesses up. But how is that changing, Johan? To what you've heard from Hernando and Paul there, are you having to reconfigure your organization so that you can be much more of a partner and break away, reimagine that sales cycle, which is vital? We all need to sell.
Yeah, I think you're touching on an important dimension, which is that of investment, and investment is often associated with capital, and capital is associated with assets, and assets tend to become heavy, right? And what we see a lot in these days is that where people are very used to having assets, particularly in the IT infrastructure world, we see that a lot of parties, and whether they're either the end users or the vendors, are becoming less enamored with being an asset-heavy organization. And it's almost as if you see a separation of the seas here as well, where certain organizations are in there, even publicly speaking about no longer wanting to be an asset-heavy organization. Take an example, British Telecom has a stated strategy in part of their annual report. They want to be asset light, they want to be a service provider. We see the same thing coming from our end user clients who say, we have data centers that we built 5 years, 10 years, 15 years ago. We don't want those data centers anymore because they're slowing us down. We'd rather take this on tap. We would rather take it either from a cloud or from a provider who's specialized, but we're looking for a lot more agility where the investment's taken on by somebody else who is an asset specialist, and we can then consume all of these assets on a way that we serve, and we can introduce a little bit of competitiveness in that cycle, and that's good for us.
That's fascinating. And Paul, is that something you're seeing, that organizations that are changing, that when you have that difficult conversation with them, they're either taking on some burden almost, as Johan just put across, on behalf of your organization and helping you manage your way forward?
I think what we're looking for is, for a partner, is a technology organization that's going to invest in us. They want to take our time and understand where we're heading. And they want us to make big commitments. So, you buy a cloud service, or you buy some licenses, or you buy some technology. Unless you made a really bad mistake, you're not going anywhere anytime soon, and you need to maximize that. So what I like to do is, really get past the sales organization, and if you can really connect with the techies, and I think we have some really good relationships with. They're not nothing like startups, but actually they're quite small companies that work on platforms like AWS or Azure, but specialists with that, and if you could get to know the CTO and the CEO, and work with them and form those relationships, we really matter to them because we're a significant company with a brand name in the chemical and sustainability industry, and we want to do exciting things. So they like doing that. So I like to get to them, get to the real techies, who can then leverage that expertise, who can make a real difference, even if it's just implementing basic tools. And I think there's the other area is, with the big guys, I think trying to connect with them in a different way. So we've had really interesting experiences with AWS and Microsoft, with Azure, because of their zero carbon commitment. And we're all about sustainability. And we've been developing new materials for batteries for vehicles. We've got pilot plants in blue hydrogen and green hydrogen, and we've been in fuel cells for 2 decades. So we've made some really interesting connections, if you like, which are not transactional. They're actually about sort of shared purpose, and I think that at the end of the day, they're still commercial relationships, but actually, if they're built on a shared purpose that is going 2 directions, I think that's helpful.
Yeah. Hernando, is that something you see as well? Actually trying to get into that other layer of an organization builds a stronger relationship and builds a partnership in effect.
Absolutely. I agree. One of the things that I ask myself is, as I'm evaluating a partnership, for example, is this a core competency of ours? Is this part of our business model? And if it is, then we probably do it ourselves. And if it's not, then we outsource that to a partner that could probably do it better and at a lower cost than we could, right? I mean, if you think about business, first mover advantage is critical. And I personally don't understand organizations that they get into like owning things, assets, as was mentioned, that don't really provide business value or don't drive a specific business outcome, other than there's a bunch more technology stuff that needs to be managed and owned and operated and maintained. And so if you take all those resources and you apply them to your core business, then you can gain some of those advantages by being iterating faster. And it could be the difference between winning and losing. So I think having those strategic partnerships in place and having a partner that really understands your core business and how to get there and how to drive those results has been critical for us, and I'm sure it'll continue to be critical for us in the future.
And Johan, are you, as an organization, as a supplier, getting more comfortable and directing people into those engineers and helping that relationship fertilize and grow?
Yeah, I'm very much subscribed to the perspective. I also see in industry that the ratio of tech people to sales in the tech vendor landscape has shifted dramatically. But I'd like to come back also to what Paul was referencing on the sustainability side, because he's right. We see the same thing. It's as if a new generation of procurement people, but also our own employees, that are driving us towards a sense of purpose. And it's almost as if in our employee feedback, we hear also from our people saying, I'm not sure I want to work for a company who's not willing to invest in sustainability. And that really has driven on our side a grand force that kind of happened in roughly the same time period as the pandemic hit us, but has allowed us to make great strides because there was so much momentum from the teams behind it to start actively be part of the movement towards sustainability in our own industry. There's some European initiatives that we're now part of, and it felt that sense of purpose also had a severe impact on our own people. And I felt that was really strong in our ability then to turn outward and say, this is what we are all about, and it kind of supersedes the pure business purpose that we're all already so used to for so many decades. So it created what I call really a feel-good moment for the teams when there was more investment happening in that direction. So I just thought it was interesting to fall back on what Paul was referencing there.
I absolutely agree, and it's in all the interviews and conversations I have with CIOs and CTOs, I'm hearing more and more how important purpose is to the whole business, and therefore is shaping so many business decisions. And it's inevitable, isn't it? Who you then partner or procure from have to reflect that same environment. Hernando, is the same happening in your industry? Are you seeing a lot more drive towards purpose?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think, we're being in healthcare, I think it's pretty interesting and pretty neat how healthcare has been brought to the forefront as a result of the pandemic. Obviously something tragic for many, many people, but there's a lot of amazing people that are now stepping up, and we're a purpose-driven, mission-driven organization. So that is absolutely something that resonates with us.
So how do we start this change in the dynamic? What's the seed that brings about the beginnings of a partnership, especially if it's an organization that has maybe had a bit of a sales culture in the first place, or maybe a sort of a not a particularly, or perhaps combative relationship with its technology partners. Johan, have you begun that journey?
Yeah, well, I'd like to talk about one of the movements that I see, which is actually that it's not like we're the only ones who are kind of by design trying to change it. I see it very much as a grassroots movement. It feels almost like a bottoms-up movement, where as a consequence of a lot of the technology stack moving open source, there's genuinely a democratization of technology happening, which puts much more power in the hands of the developers who sit at the early parts of the life cycle. And it's in more and more cases so that they make the early decisions, where they've been empowered to deploy open stacks. They're empowered to use agile development methods, and as part of that empowerment, they're now choosing the platforms they wish to run. And whether it's chefs and Puppet in their development cycle, or whether it's the deployment platforms once they go in operation, we really see that democratization is having a big effect on that, because that means that it is no longer the whole organization that chooses to standardize on a platform, but it's kind of a naturally developed and organic movement within a larger organization, where there still could be competing platforms, but it's the workforce of technicians, and as Paul was referencing, wanting to get to the techies, talking to the techies, who in the end are deciding more and more what the buildup of the technology stack is. And I think that has a lot of good aspects that come with that. And you see that also now in the relative position of a number of vendors who are making bets on those kind of open stacks.
I don't know, is that something you're seeing, that your structure of people below you are having a lot more influence, and that sort of changes the whole dynamic of the people you work with?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I see it internally. I love the concept of this grassroots movement. I see it externally as well, because in some cases we're the customer, in some cases we're the partner. And I'm starting to see, for example, I was looking at a presentation the other day, and in the training material of this particular supplier, vendor, because we haven't done business with them yet, so they're not a partner. And right in their training manual, it says something to the effect of, "We are a partner, we are not a vendor." Right? So I'm starting to see a lot more of that. I think history is helping some of that, right? If you think about the amount of time that technology sales has been around, on a relative basis, it's actually not that long, right? But you're now getting to see the folks who have been most effective at it are the ones who have probably taken this more partner-esque approach versus just being a supplier and selling stuff. And so I think that the younger generation is coming in and seeing, wow, that was really effective. That worked, right? Playing the long game, like Paul mentioned. It's not just about how do we solve a problem today, and playing that long game. So I'm hoping that that will help propel us into the future.
And it is incredible, isn't it? When you look at an organization like Microsoft, which of course, for the early part of my career, we all wrote about its sales culture, and that certain presentation we've all seen on YouTube. And now when you go to Microsoft head offices, or when you're allowed to, it's completely changed. The environment has completely changed, and on a very base level, it's a happier place to go and do business, whatever your business may be. Paul, in an organization like yours, it's not just your technologists that are driving the culture change that Johan and Hernando have influenced. You're a science business. You're full of very tech literate, influential, clever people. Are they part of this sea change as well as your own staff in your own department?
Yes, and I think that's, as we've talked about, it's about purpose, and it's about the value system. Now, I think we all need to recognise that Johnson Matthey, nor Microsoft, nor or an IT startup will need to make money at some point in order to do the right thing. So we exist in a commercial world. So it's not being naive about that, but it is about that journey. And I think your example of how Satya Nadella has made a phenomenal difference there. And I was lucky enough to hear him speak at a research board conference, I think about 6 months after he'd taken over. And he spoke of his vision, and it was basically, I'm a developer, I love technology. That's what I'm about. And we've lost our way. And there was waves of skepticism given off by, sort of lots of CIOs who'd, sort of been on the receiving end of, the talk you talked about. But as you say, it's really changed that culture into something that you will you want to work alongside. But I think I was reflecting, and sort of as a sort of CIO, you are fortunate enough to receive lots and lots and lots of approaches every day in your inbox, which you can't really sort through. And I'm probably missing some wonderful things as well. But I always say, don't, whatever you're telling me about, that sounds like a fabulous piece of technology. And, I'm sure it's, wonderfully developed, but don't waste your time convincing me. Go and talk to the key people in the organization, who are there to understand, what colos we want to use, or what cloud services we want to use, or what tools we want to, in development we want to use. The worst thing a CIO can do is go, well, I met this really interesting lady or gentleman, and they've got this fabulous tool. I really think we should use it. Well, firstly, I think my guys would probably laugh to my face and sort of tell me you're the last person that should be making that call. I think, but where does that lead you? That leads you to actually build that long-term relationship, and with the organization, and we've got a lot of things in tech already. So please don't try and sell us something that we've got that works already. That's waste our time and your time. Work out where we've got needs. Ask us where we've got needs. Try and and then convince us, that will meet our business requirements, and that will support what we're trying to do with our scientists on that. It's whether you want to be a sales organization or whether you want to be a technology organization, I think.
Yeah. And finally, a partnership is not something that's done on a piece of paper and sort of dealt with in the boardroom. It's long term. It has to continually be developed. So, quick round, if I may, Johan. How do you and your organisation develop the relationship that is the essence of a partnership?
Well, the first aspect that comes to mind for that is for us to invest in our people so they can deliver that relevance that Paul was referencing, which means that we have to be bold enough to wanting to teach our people about the industry that they're serving, even though one could argue that we as Equinix provide a horizontal service. We don't look at it like that. When our people are working with financial clients, we want them to understand the exchange. If they work with healthcare, we want them to understand electronic medical records and so on and so forth, because these workloads end up being different. When you were talking about a connected vehicle, you quite quickly realize that you can't put all the data for a connected car in a central place. At a certain point in time, the law of physics just requires, physically for you to push the data to the edge and have all the fancy stuff happen at the edge location. Well, our people need to understand that. When you're working with a financial services house and you're supporting the London Stock Exchange or the high frequency traders, they're working in a hub and spoke model. It's quite centralized. And these are examples of where if we teach our people to start on this journey and they feel bold enough to invest so they become a more relevant person in the interaction, that's where we find that we can start building a foundation. You need active listening skills. By just coming and asking, what is it that you just have the needs for, that's not what most CIOs expect. What they're looking for is a give and take, where you can provide an insight of how you work with another client, and in return, they will tell you a little bit about a project. And if the conversation can go on that basis, then you are sharing a little bit of a philosophical present, a digital present in the conversation. And in return for that, you get something that allows you to build a relationship between the two. And that's the kind of ways that we try to teach our people, where they're curious enough to invest themselves so they can give something in a dialogue of discovery as they're speaking to their clients. I think that's a very foundational component for building partnerships.
And then how do you make sure that your partnerships continue to grow and foster growth?
Great question, Mark. First of all, you got to hire great teams, right? Because to the comments made earlier, you can't do it all yourself. You can't be involved in every one of these relationships. It's just not possible as you grow, as you scale. Secondly, ensure that your teams understand the business. They understand the business problems you're trying to solve. They understand the business outcomes that you're trying to achieve. And now your folks can go and cultivate these relationships with these partners where everyone is aligned on the same goal versus just bringing in technology for the sake of bringing in technology. I remember years back, new technology came out. It doesn't really matter what it was because this happens very often, and the leader at the time said, we have to find where we can use this, right? I want to get this thing, and where can we use it? Versus saying, why don't we go figure out what business problems we have, and then the technology comes second. And I think if you do that and you cultivate the relationships with the right partners, not just partnering up with people where you don't have anything to offer them and they don't have anything to offer you, that would be a waste of time, right? So understand the business, cultivate the relationships, start driving in the same direction, and that, in my opinion, is what is going to lead to success.
And finally, Paul, how do you ensure that the partnership is curated and grows?
So I'll vague this up because I don't want to be too interesting. But a company, well-known company, I sort of worked with earlier, and had a very good and very, I think, reasonably profitable relationship with for them, and they provided us with good service. We then got into a very big implementation of a very well-known commercial package, and the CEO promised that they would deliver this, to spec and to the budget and on time. And for a variety of reasons, on both sides, it went wrong and went off the rails. And they stuck with it, and they must have made a reasonable loss on it. but they stuck with it because they'd promised to do it. And that's about trust and for the long-term relationship. And when I asked those suppliers last March and April to take 10 to 15% out of their cost base, and the ones that did, that wasn't easy. And that hurt where it hurts, which is on the cost side or the revenue side. But that's a relationship. That's not a supplier.
It's been a fantastic debate, and I think if there's two things I can draw from it. One is, it's interesting that the service community is on a particular journey, and I think it's going to be really interesting to watch, isn't it, as to how there's a lot of bravery in investing in that point you made, Johan, of educating and allowing your people to specialize. That there's risk in that, in terms of there'll be times when those people aren't bringing in the bottom line because they're investing in themselves and therefore investing in your business. But those gaps are always hard to report on. But and it's also fascinating to hear from Hernando and Paul about how the community within organizations is changing as well. So, and how you are actually allowing so much more influence to come to bear in how decisions are made, which is fantastic. Johan Arts, Paul Kobe and Hernando Salada, it's been a fantastic debate. Thank you for sharing your insights with us. And this has been a Hot Topics roundtable discussion in association with Equinix.